Welcome to the Better Together podcast. I'm your host, Kyla, and today I wanted to talk about inspiration and creativity and what motivates us and drives us, but also how do we stick with that motivation or how do we find that motivation in times of feeling burnt out or tired? And I wanted to hit on this topic because it's something I've been feeling lately. Like I talked about a couple episodes ago, I have a full-time job that's been crazy busy, and I just finished up a bunch of projects, and now it's gotten a little slower. And in those times where it's like super busy, I find that I am very motivated and inspired and exhausted. But then when in times where it gets a little bit slower, I find that I get less motivated and I get a little burnout. And maybe that burnout comes from doing so much and then not giving myself a break. So I wanted to talk about that a little bit and, what motivates me and what are the things that inspire me and push me to create. And this doesn't apply just to the creative field. This literally applies to everyone at any phase of your life and also just like in any area of your life. We all have times where we feel burnout and unmotivated, and times of feeling motivated and excited about whatever the thing is we're doing. So, I'm going to be talking about that today. The first thing I kind of wanted to talk about is just how it can be hard as a grown up who has a full-time job to balance between, your personal stuff that you like to do on the side outside of work and your work stuff. And for me, I'm a creative person. I'm in a creative field and my outlets tend to be creative. So one of my outlets is this podcast. And so that comes with, producing my own episodes, thinking of episode ideas, editing and making this like a weekly show. And sometimes that can be hard to balance doing this podcast with having a full-time job where sometimes you're going to be working long hours, you're going to be working late, you're going to be working early, whatever it is. And so before I started my career, even years back, when I was still in school, you have all this time to do personal projects and you don't really have to, carve out time because at least for me, I went to school for photography. I got my undergraduate degree in photography. So all my schoolwork was creative work that I wanted to be doing. And same with grad school, honestly, too. A lot of it was, it's a lot of video work and whatever. And also, for those of you who don't know, I'm in the journalism documentary space. For work. And so everything I do is on a creative level. And so when I got out of school, something that was a big shift for me was that, having a full-time 9 to 5 job, how do I find time for my own personal work? And I think that it can be hard to try to find the time to do those things in between having a full-time job because I feel like a lot of times, when people come home from work, they just want to like chill, maybe read a book or watch TV, cook dinner, whatever it is. And that stuff takes up time, so it's hard to figure out where in the day you can possibly also add in, the stuff you want to do on the side. That's your personal stuff. But I want to say that I think it's really, really important to find things and outlets outside of your daily job that motivate you and inspire you. First, let's talk about that burnout feeling and what you do in situations of feeling burnout. And then I'm going to kind of get into, what are the things that motivate me and inspire me, and maybe some things that could help you get inspired or motivated. So, first of all, the burnout feeling. The burnout feeling to me is when you just like feel like you have zero motivation. Like you just can't you can't do anymore. Like there's just not you're just tired and you're like, I'm done. I don't have any creative juice in me anymore. I need a break. That is how I felt immediately after being in these really crazy, hectic projects I was working on in my job. And so I needed to give myself, a little bit of time to recharge and catch up, and especially with the podcast and stuff. So I will say one thing that I think that being creative and feeling inspired and motivated all worked along with taking breaks. Taking breaks is extremely important, allowing yourself time and space to do things that have nothing to do with like whatever your job is, or trying to make something that, honestly, I don't even know if this makes sense, but my podcast, I put a lot of pressure on this podcast and I want it to do well. But I think it's also important to find outlets that are things that you don't have to have any sort of pressure. There's no pressure, like no expectations. And something for me is, I like to draw a lot. I have this thing, which probably a lot of people don't know about me, is I draw faces and they don't look it's not like well drawn. There's no intention behind it. They're just the reason I started doing it is because it was kind of a meditative thing for me. Like I liked the activity of drawing the face, the eyes, the nose, the mouth, coloring it in, and using crazy colors sometimes, and making these like different personalities out of these like cartoon people basically. But there's no intention really behind it. It's just for to feel good and to, you know, it's just an outlet that has no pressure behind it. And I find that when I also do it because I have to like move my hands all the time because I pick my skin, or I fidget a lot. So a lot of times when I'm like watching TV, or I am doing something that's like mind numbing, I'll pull out my sketch pad and I'll start drawing. But I also find that it gets me in a state of feeling, one, creative. It doesn't put pressure on, like, I'm not putting pressure on myself to make it into this big thing. It's just for me to feel good. And I think it's important to have things like that, that make you feel good outside of like your job, or outside of trying to make something into something, if that makes any sense. When I'm feeling burnt out and I need a break from things, but I still want to be creative and be thinking about certain things, I'll, draw. Another big thing is like when I am in a rut, I like to brainstorm with the people around me. What are things going on? And I'm talking about right now specific to the podcast, because a lot of times I will get I'll get burnout from work, and then I won't be motivated to do the podcast. And it's hard for me to sometimes think of, what's the next thing I'm going to talk about. And a lot of times the topics that I tend to talk about are things that are going on in my life or going on around me that I can relate to, that are relatable, that I feel like are relatable topics to anybody listening. Sometimes I like to just bounce ideas off of the people around me, whether it's family or friends, or, whoever I'm talking with. So sometimes I'll that can have to do with, like, if I'm having a conversation and someone's telling me about something that's going on in their life, or we get into a conversation, about a show, or, little things like that, I'll take, and those things can inspire me. And I like to collaborate with people. I don't like to do Actually, that's wrong. I still like to do things, like, completely independently myself, but I always think things in a creative sense turn out better when you're asking people for their critique, and you're asking about ideas, or trying to talk through different ideas to make it better, or, make it more. I don't know what the word is, but I just think that sometimes having getting, advice, or having talking to someone else about whatever that idea is, can be motivating and inspiring, especially when you're in a state of not feeling super motivated or inspired, or, have a lot of ideas in your head. Another thing is, I like to look at stuff. I really love fashion. I love art. I love just, like, seeing stuff and things around me. Like, anything can inspire me. It could literally be, like, someone's outfit, or it can be it's, like, literally anything. I'm, like, trying to think of, like, weird stuff, but it could be a color. Like, I could see a color. It could be a, um, logo, or, uh like, some sort of font, and I'm like, "Oh, that's really cool. How can I make my, logo better?" Or things like that, in terms of the podcast. And so something that I like to use a lot when I'm trying to think of new ideas, or I'm just bored and there's nothing to do, is I like to look at Pinterest, and I make a lot of Pinterest boards for ideas, and it helps me kind of maybe configure, like, some sort of theme that I'm trying to think about, whether it is, like, with, let's say, like, even with this podcast right now, I'm working on, trying to rebrand a little bit, and so with that, I'm using Pinterest to look at, like, different designs that I think are interesting. I use Pinterest, like, also for, to get inspired about, like, fashion trends and stuff, and what are things that, like, look cute for this, or this, or this, and doing that also inspires a lot of, like, creativity and ideas, and feeling motivated, and certain things like that. Also, thinking about times of like, certain times in the day that you feel most motivated, or you feel, like, most creative. Like, I have certain times in the day that I feel, like, inspired, and I need to, like, sit down and work. For me, that's early in the morning, or later in the evening. So, an example, since I keep using the podcast as an example, is I write a lot of my episode outlines in the mornings when I have, like, a fresh headspace, and it just kind of gets me. It's just a time where I just feel a lot of motivation and creativity, and am thinking of new ideas and whatever. And then I usually podcast like actually record my podcast later in the evenings. And I started doing this because of the lighting that I have set up. My purple lights, it looks best at night. But also, I feel a lot of motivation when it's later in the evening. So I can come home from work and chill for a little bit. And then when it hits, like, a certain time, I'm like, okay, like, I need to get up and do something, and move, and think, or whatever. So I also try to think of, what are things that you enjoy. Um, Things that I personally enjoy are thinking. I like to be in my head a lot. Not everybody does, but I like to be in my head, and going on, like, different thought tangents in my brain. And a lot of times my thought tangents end up as ideas, and that also, like, goes into, I need a decent amount of alone time and space with myself to be able to think clearly, and to think of some of these ideas. So thinking is something I enjoy. Also, I like to write a lot. So a lot of times for my podcast outlines, I will write out kind of like a small essay of what I want to write about just to get all my thoughts out. And I don't there are times where you guys have seen me, read those outlines when it's like a specific topic where I want to like read something, but a lot of times I'm not reading those things. I just do it because I enjoy writing and it helps me think of ideas as I'm doing it and organizing. So it's not just like I'll also do like a list of, bullet points that I want to talk about, but I find that it sticks in my brain more and it helps me think of more ideas when I'm actually like concentrating and writing something that I feel like is well written. If that makes any sense, because I enjoy writing and I enjoy thinking. And so it just kind of combines those things where it allows me to just get into this very creative workflow and headspace, I guess, if that makes sense. I also really like learning, and I tend to be a very visual learner, and I learn by doing things. So I like to try different things, that are not in within like the field of projects that I typically work on, whether it is, reading a book that is not in the typical genre that I tend to go for, or, you know, even like coloring or painting in a style that I'm not like used to, or taking a different type of workout class than I normally do, or just like learning about different things that interest me. Those tend to inspire ideas and inspire things that I want to create. And even like I don't really know anything about graphic design, but I like the idea of like playing around and putting things together. And like sometimes I'll just play around on I have I'll just play around, like, on the different Adobe apps because I have access to that stuff, and so I'll play on Illustrator and InDesign and, different applications that I can use for, like, more graphic stuff when, I don't really know much about it, but it's fun to, like, learn about different things, and that can inspire different ideas. Also just fun to have outlets that are not not again, nothing that you have pressure or intent behind, and also just having things outside of your day job that isn't just, like, mind numbing or, like, movies and TV can be a huge inspiration, of course, but, like, not just that aren't just watching TV, you know? So, having hobbies is basically what I'm saying. Having hobbies is important. Other things that, like, I like to do that inspire me, just generally creating, drawing, painting, cooking, baking, things like that. Um, I love reading, looking at things around me, like I said earlier, art, nature, fashion, going on walks, being outdoors is inspiring. Being around people. I'm an extremely extroverted person. I get a lot of my energy from being around people. And so also like again, just that what I said earlier about bouncing ideas off of friends and collaborating and things like that. I find that when I fill my cup up, that helps to motivate me and inspire me and think of new ideas or try things that are a little bit different. And also staying very active and like working out is very important for my mental health. So, like doing things that are good for your mental health. Also, it's like when you're feeling burnt out, you're probably burning both ends of the candle and you're not giving yourself enough of a break. And that's why breaks are important because you need time and space to like re energize recharge your battery is really what it is. I guess I wanna just wrap this episode up by asking a few questions. What are things that make you feel inspired? How do you get inspired? What happens when you feel burnt out and have a lack of creativity? How do you get yourself out of that funk? And in the reverse, when you are feeling super inspired and motivated and creative, how do you organize your thoughts and execute that idea? How do you take action on that creative idea or endeavor, basically? Um, so I want you guys to write in with some of your thoughts. I think it's really, for me, just to wrap this up a little bit, I think it's important to one, give yourself breaks when you're feeling burnout. Be nice to yourself. Don't put too much pressure on yourself, but also create deadlines for yourself if you want to like execute something. That's something that I didn't really touch on in this episode, but when I think a lot of times it's hard to get the thing going, to actually like start the thing or idea you have. And I think for me, at least with this podcast, like something that helped get it going when I first had this idea was to create deadlines. When am I going to post my first episode? I actually recorded several episodes before even posting anything. I was like, I want to have 5 episodes recorded and edited, ready to post so that I know I'm ready to like get this out there basically. So, that's that deadlines, goal setting, things like that. Also like doing things that you enjoy outside of that creative endeavor that don't put pressure on yourself. Also like trying to get when you're feeling like not super creative, trying to like find outlets of things that inspire you. One thing I didn't mention that like really inspires me is music. I love listening to music, and it helps me get into this like mindset of this creative mindset. I don't know really what it is, but I just like I love listening while I am like looking at stuff, or while I'm doing something creative, like, drawing my faces and things like that. Or, even when I'm writing like a podcast outline, sometimes I even listen to music when I'm working. If I'm doing something that's like mundane, or not mundane, but something that's like mind numbing enough where I don't have to pay too much attention. But yeah, I think that like it's important to try different things and like get to know yourself, to figure out what are the things that are going to like help you stay motivated, stay inspired, stay creative. These are the things that I've talked about today are the things that like help me and are things that I've had to navigate, figuring out. And then also just like having balance between everything, like making sure that I am getting enough sleep, making sure that I'm eating enough, making sure that I'm drinking enough water, making sure that I'm, have a workout routine that I'm doing weekly, making sure that I'm, still hanging out with my friends and still doing my extra stuff I want to do, and still also making time to do my podcast stuff weekly. So there's a lot. There's a lot. I'm curious what you guys think of this. Please feel free to write in with questions, comments, concerns, stories. What are the things that make you feel creative or motivated or not? You can write in at thebettertogetherpod@gmail.com. Please remember to rate, like, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel and to my Spotify and Apple Podcasts and all that stuff. Please follow me on my personal Instagram, which is Kyla_Millberger. Follow me on the podcast Instagram, which is the_bettertogether_podcast. And everything will be linked down in the description below. All right, and I will see you next Sunday. Bye.